All right, back at it again with episode, I believe this is 6 of the exercise application assignment. It's Saturday, September 9th. I was going to film this yesterday, but I got distracted and was drawing 13 gorillas with crayons. That's my girlfriend as a gorilla. Okay, with that silliness out of the way. Let's talk about training and let's talk about what I learned in lecture. So training wise, I'll just go over what I did today instead of what I did yesterday because it's really immaterial. Today was shoulder focused day. So started off with a machine shoulder press, moved into some seated lateral raises, mechanical drop set on that, with partials, and then going from seated to standing, getting more partials. And then after that, what did I do? Yes, some biceps. So I did seated dumbbell curls, seated dumbbell hammer curls with partials. And then after that, the pec deck for the chest, a little bit of chest. And then finished off with some abs. So I did it on like a little plate loaded ab crunch machine. So that was my training for today. And then I like the machine shoulder press, by the way. I've been doing like Smith machine incline bench. Smith machine, like a high incline shoulder press on the Smith machine, which feels really good. I like it. But like the setup is a bit annoying because you have to make sure your bench is all set up evenly in the Smith machine. With a machine press, you don't have to worry about that. Plus, on the machine, the arms are independent, which is better. So I think I'm going to stick with that for a while, actually. Feels super good. I liked it a lot. And then the seated lateral raises are feeling good, going nice and heavy with those. What I found is I'm having to start to push like the weight on that a little bit because traditionally I've done my lateral raises extremely strict, with high rep ranges, thinking like 10 to 15 or sometimes even up to 20. And I found that kind of stagnates after a while. You kind of have to just force the weight on there. That's what I'm finding with all my isolations, really, is that you have to treat them like they're a compound and just force progression extremely hard. And that's been working for just about every isolation that I do. So I guess that's the key for me right now. So if we're going over what we covered in lecture, we basically just did a review of the stuff we already talked about. Yeah, I don't think we covered any new material really. We just went over depolarization, repolarization, how a signal is sent and how that works. So I don't know if I talked about this in the last episode, but before I go train, I drink like a little Gatorade Zero packet mixed with creatine. We've already covered what the creatine does, but the Gatorade Zero packet, that's my electrolytes. So I'm getting some sodium, some magnesium. Let's look at the little thing. What's in here? What electrolytes are in here? 230 milligrams of sodium. Put 70 milligrams of potassium. Is there any magnesium? Nope. But really, if we're talking about sodium, potassium is all we really care about for sending a signal, right? Because we got our cell right here. It's full of potassium, and there's a little bit of sodium in it. And then outside the cell, we have all this sodium. And while we're at rest, we have the sodium-potassium pump going, and that's kind of, making the cell more negative. It's exchanging the sodium within the cell for 2 potassium. So we're shooting out 3 positives, getting back 2 positives. That's a net of -1, and it contributes to the concentration gradient, but also to the polarization, right? So the charge difference. So that's what happens when the cells are at rest. Then we want to send a signal. We have the the motivation centers in the brain. Once that fires up, and then we're like, okay, send a signal, do your machine shoulder press. What's happening is let's take like the first cell for the first nerve in the series, for example. It's going to be, our somatic motor nerve, right? Is that right? Somatic motor, yes. Say somatic motor nerve, efferent pathway going right here. And we get that signal. What happens within the cell is basically enough, some of those sodium channels are open, but enough of them like get open, right? So we have a little action potential spike, it's like coming up, and it may not reach the full thing, but if we're motivating, right, in the motivation centers in our brain where it begins, if we get it up to that point, we get it up to threshold from negative 70 millivolts up to negative 50 millivolts, then we're gonna shoot up all the way to like plus 30, and that's our depolarization. And then we get our action potential, and that propagates down the cell, goes and down the axon. The axon might encounter another nerve on the way if there's like a travels down the spinal cord, down the nerve. I don't know if there's another axon along the way, maybe. Like if there's a pre and post ganglionic thing happening there. I don't know how motor nerves work, but basically, when that hits the muscle, we get to the neuromuscular junction, right? And we have these things called motor units. So that nerve and all of the muscle fibers that it innervates make up a motor unit. So like you can have a single nerve with a lot of different inputs, right? So like my arm, right? This isn't the dendrite this time, this is the other end. So we have the axon, and it's coming down, and we have all these inputs. Each one of these inputs goes to a muscle fiber and creates an NMJ, a neuromuscular junction. And when that action potential propagates down, right, it's going to go to the end here, it's going to push out these vesicles of neurotransmitter. Usually acetylcholine, and acetylcholine is going to bind to these ligand-gated channels, and that's going to open up and allow sodium in. And well, when sodium goes into the muscle cell, we start the depolarization process. So that's why it's important to get your electrolytes, If you're low on electrolytes, you're probably going to experience some cramping or general lack of like ability in the gym. I know when I'm low on electrolytes in the gym, it's not necessarily that I feel like tired. It's that I feel like, man, the weight just isn't moving like it usually is. I can usually do this weight, and for whatever reason, it's just not budging. So that's usually how I know, like, probably didn't get enough electrolytes. So that's what I think about. See, what else did we cover? Yeah, so I mean, you're starting out, sodium out, potassium's in, and then when sodium comes in, you're super positive because now we have more positives in here. But the sodium has equalized between the two membranes. So how do we return to baseline? We pump potassium out. And well, now both of them are equalized, right? So you're returning to that resting membrane potential, kind of. But now you're in this sort of refractory period, and in that refractory period, the sodium potassium pump is returning you to baseline. So anything else we covered? Sodium potassium pump obviously uses ATP. And so that's where we get our ATP usage. That's kind of like the connection between bioenergetics and, like movement, I guess you'd say, or at least stimulating movement. We did talk about temporal and spatial summation. So whether it's you have a bunch of different, nerves sending a signal to one spot, spatial summation, this is like your firing squad. That's what I think about. Like if your goal is to it's a firing squad of like taser weapons. You know, like imagine a future weapon where you shoot lightning bolts. That's what spatial summation is. It's a firing squad of lightning bolts. And then you have temporal summation, which is like a big turret machine gunner whose entire job is just rate of fire. You know, it has a high rate of fire. These guys, they have like rifles. This guy has a machine gun and he's just giving action potentials and shooting out more and more neurotransmitter. Both, you know, spatial summation is a little bit slower. Temporal is a bit more direct, but they both achieve the same purpose. It's kind of, you know, how the circuitry works, right? Like if you ever think about Minecraft Redstone, I don't know, you know, if you're watching this, Dr. Hyde, you know, I don't know if you have played Minecraft or you have children or even know, but there's redstone and there's different logic gates, right? So like, if both of these signals don't come in, this doesn't fire. That's the purpose of spatial summation, at least in my brain. So it's like having, you know, redstone circuits. If both of these aren't powered, then it won't power the thing, you know, versus we're just running a line of redstone. You know, that's basically how it works. Then we did talk about EPSPs and IPSPs, which is pretty simple. It's basically like excitatory, inhibitory. Do the thing, don't do the thing. You know, if you have two guys in your ear saying, hey, you should do the thing, hey, you shouldn't do the thing, I'm gonna sit here, I'm gonna be confused. You know, I represent the either the muscle fiber or the next nerve. You know, but if you have two guys saying, hey, do the thing, and this guy's saying, hey, I don't think you should do the thing, I'm probably gonna do the thing, because you know it have more people tell me I should do it. You know, and of course vice versa. And maybe it's not that. Maybe this guy's like, do the thing, do the thing, do the thing, and this guy's like, do the thing, do the thing. This guy's, you know, he's in my ear. You know, he's really excited about this. I should probably do the thing. That's how I think about it, because you know, you have the sum of these signals is essentially what's going to get you to do something. I think we talked about reflexes and reciprocal inhibition. We did talk about that. We touched on it briefly. We, you know, sat on the tables and, you know, basically saying your muscle is lengthened so quickly that your body reacts by contracting. And like if you hit a hammer on your patellar tendon, it lengthens the muscle so quickly and unexpectedly, your body's reflexes to contract the quads. But also there's a reaction that happens on your hamstrings, which is to relax. That's reciprocal inhibition. It also works without, you know, a reflex. You know, it can just be like you're going to squat, so your quads have to, your hamstrings need to shorten and your quads need to lengthen, right? And when you come up on the squat, your quads need to shorten, your hamstrings need to lengthen. Now, of course, that doesn't mean squats train your hamstrings to any significant degree, but you know, that system has to be in place, or else, you know, if your hamstring just kind of stayed the same length, I'm not sure what would happen. If you get bunched up, it'd be kind of weird. We talked about the Golgi tendon organ, you know, measures tension in your muscles, and then muscle spindles measure the relative length. Your muscle spindle is responsible for that stretch reflex, the myotactic reflex. Myotatic. Is it myotatic? Yeah. And then all or none principle. If you get a signal, it's gonna go. You know, it's like he explained it. It's firing a bullet. You know, when you pull back on that trigger past a certain point, the bullet's coming out. You can't go back and grab that bullet before it hits the target. Yeah, I mean, that's basically all we covered in lecture anyways. Oh, also that, what is it? The inverse stretch reflex, we did cover that. So like in strength sports, if you're trying to squat a weight that you're not really ready to handle yet, and you come back up with it and you just, you failed, that's the inverse stretch reflex. It's decreased muscle tension following vigorous contraction. It's also triggered by passive stretching, interestingly. But the book talks about how the ability to resist that reflex is part of, strength sports in general, like powerlifting and whatnot. Being able to grind for that rep and resist the urge for your body to try and protect itself. So basically it's just sending an IPSP to whatever muscle is contracting. Did talk a little bit about the types of fibers and whatnot. You have your slow twitch, your fast twitch, and that's going to be like your oxidative fibers versus your glycolytic fibers. Yeah. Oh yeah, the size principle. That's why that's important, because we did cover the size principle. We're recruiting smaller motor units first, and then bigger motor units as our as our receptors kind of realize, oh, we need more force to do whatever we're doing, because we don't want to injure ourselves by, picking up a book and me thinking it's 150 pounds and donking myself in the face. We don't want that. So that's about what we covered in lecture. I mean, how this applies to my training, obviously, like warm-up sets, right? You do a warm-up set sometimes even when, you're like, my shoulders are warm, right? Okay, so I just finished shoulder press. Obviously, I did my warm-up sets on shoulder press because I don't want to, not be prepared to lift that certain weight. And, low power mode. Because I want to be prepared to lift that certain weight. Then when I go to lateral raises, I'm going to take a warm-up set on lateral raises because it's a different movement. And if I try, to just jump into what I think my working weight's going to be for that day, I'm probably going to wind up either grabbing something too heavy or too light, and I'm not going to be able to recruit those motor units as effectively, so the size principle with that, if my body just immediately recruited maximum motor units, when I'm doing a warm-up set, right, I'm gonna throw my shoulder out of socket. But if I take them warm-up sets and kind of get a feel for the movement, it's like almost warm-up sets are like forcing the size principle in practice, because I could just grab the weight I think I'm gonna work with and then my motor units are recruited, right? But it's almost like double size principle, if you get what I'm saying. I'm kind of rambling. We're at almost 18 minutes. You kind of get what I'm saying, hopefully. At the very least, I'm talking out my ideas. So that'll do it for this episode, this long episode of the exercise application assignment. I will see you in the next one.